Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. I am Becks Heyhoe-Khalil, the Executive Director of United to End Homelessness with Orange County United Way, and welcome to today's community chat. This is our monthly series where I have the privilege of interviewing experts on homelessness and helping us to learn from them. So this month, in recognition and celebration of Pride Month, we are focusing on housing insecurity and homelessness among LGBTQ plus individuals, a population who are disproportionately impacted due to systemic discrimination, stigma, and gaps in culturally competent services. National data shows that LGBTQ plus people, particularly youth and trans individuals, unfortunately experience higher rates of homelessness. And here in Orange County, we are not immune to this. We continue to see the need for policy change, community education, and intentional outreach to ensure equity in housing access. And today, we are lucky to be joined by two incredible advocates from Equality California, Wendy Anguiano and Abby Lawlor, who work across policy and programs to remove barriers and advance equity, and we're honored to have them with us today. Welcome.
Hello, my name is Wendy, pronoun she, her, hers. I'm a program manager at Equality California for our diversity, equity, and inclusion training program. So we do a lot of trainings for healthcare and homeless service providers. If you're unfamiliar with Equality California, we do work all across California, moving pro-equality legislation, doing a lot of things around advocacy and education. And so here we work really closely with homeless service providers in order to, fit our training to what they're looking for, as much as we can provide information around, thinking about LGBTQ issues. We do recognize that providers are like the boots on the ground, so to speak. So we recognize that there's a lot of work there and a lot of collaboration. And, these things are always changing when it comes to policies, whether at the local, state, or even national level. So there's a lot of considerations there for them. But that's a little bit about what we do, and I'll pass it along to my wonderful colleague, Abby.
Thank you so much, Wendy. Everyone, my name is Abby. I use she or they pronouns. Either works for me. And yes, as Wendy said, I also help with this work, and I'm really excited to talk with you all today.
Thank you so much. We definitely have the experts here for this conversation. And so I'd love to just start us with a grounding question to just kind of help set the tone for where we're going to go and get us all sort of on the same page. So I would love, and I think Abby, I'm coming to you first, to just, can you share a little bit about some of the specific systemic barriers that LGBTQ individuals face that might increase their risk of housing insecurity or homelessness?
Yeah, so I think in the lifetime of an LGBT individual, oftentimes around the age of coming out, which can be different for everyone, but particularly for youth, they are at risk of family rejection, being bullied in school, or sort of being denied care by their community for what they might be going through. And so that certainly puts them at increased risk of homelessness compared to their peers. And most youth, there's like a disproportionate number of all homeless youth identify as LGBTQ. And so that really creates disparities from a young age for our community. I also think when there's a group called Alianza Trans Latinx who did a widespread study. I think Alejandro was there when they sort of like did an event to publish the results, and they surveyed transgender individuals in Orange County about their experiences with housing, and in that 44% of those participants stated that they make less than $10,000 a year, and that 68% of those people had experienced discrimination in employment or in housing or in the community on because of their transgender, gender nonconforming or intersex identity. And so when we think about those things, those put in place major barriers to be able to access and afford housing. If you can't, oh, thank you so much for adding that link, Sarah. So yeah, if you aren't unable to find a stable income or a job, that makes finding housing really hard, right? And then when it comes to employment, having the right kind of documents to be able to start work, your documents might not match the name that you know yourself as. And so that's another barrier that's prevents people from being able to thrive and succeed in our community. We also know that a lot of housing providers might be not super culturally competent or might not have the training to be culturally competent with the LGBT community. A lot of housing providers that are out there might be very fundamentalist, religious, and not accept LGBT people or not allow you to move in with your partner if you're both experiencing homelessness. And then when it comes to like kind of accessing some sort of housing support, it can also be very hard because of all the things I've already mentioned, but then also the bureaucratic process of finding housing can be very slow and can be difficult, as the more time someone spends unhoused, the more health disparities they face, including being at risk for more trauma and mental health challenges because of being unhoused. I mean, we can all imagine how hard it would be, or we've experienced it ourselves. And so what I think I want to sort of like focus on in this question as well is that it's not one barrier, but it's like multiple barriers, and that those barriers can also be more challenging because if you are a LGBTQ person who's non-white or who's not a citizen, and so that is part of why we need allies and people who really care about this issue, because there's so many different ways that you can help support the community.
Absolutely. Abby, you covered a lot of ground there. So thank you so much for that really comprehensive answer, really getting at all of the different facets that need to be taken into consideration. And I love that you brought up trans Alianza Trans Latinx. We actually did a community chat with Chloe, their CEO, specifically on their report. And so that link has just got dropped in here if anybody wants to check that out. It was a groundbreaking study. It was funded by Cal Optima and the Samueli Foundation. And so would definitely encourage anybody who's watching, read that report, check out the community chat where Chloe and I got to have a really good in-depth conversation around that and what that meant and still continues to mean for our community. So talking about the community, public misperceptions, misconceptions, that's something that we've really strived to address as United to End Homelessness. And so Wendy, I would love to come to you. Can you share what are some common myths, misperceptions about homelessness for this community that you encounter in your work?
Yes. So yeah, thanks, Abby, for that comprehensive answer. It helps me, there's a lot to build on there. But one of the most common myths or misconceptions that we see is because we work a lot with homeless service providers directly in doing these free trainings. So we work with any org that comes to us to make a training that's relevant to them. And so a lot of the times when we're talking to these different organizations, a lot of times they are faith-based, we work with all kinds of orgs, but one of the misconceptions is, oh, we don't have any LGBTQ people who access our services. we want to do this, we want to be inclusive, maybe they will come if we do all these things. And we always have to go through that myth and say, you know, there is people who are identified as LGBTQ who are accessing your services every day, but you may not know. And it's like, well, what are the reasons that you may not know? And so a lot of the times it may be that people are not comfortable coming out or have faced stigma, shame and stigma when they have tried to come out. And so they might find it easier to try to hide that part of their identity in order to access services and not feel discriminated against or feel like someone's going to do something to them or something like that. So that's one of the main things that we have to counter is how can you make inclusive and accessible services so that people are comfortable letting you know about like, oh, I am part of the LGBT community and these might be things that I specifically, you know, may need, or here are some things that some barriers or things that I may specifically be facing, like how Abby mentioned, right? When we have like, you know, like single sex or gendered spaces, that creates a lot of difficulties for a lot of trans and gender diverse people, because then they're not feeling comfortable if they want to share that about themselves, where they will be placed, you know. And then a lot of the times, if you are unhoused, experiencing homelessness, then you already feel like there's a lot of things that, you know, like it's difficult for you to advocate for yourself and say, you know, this is the way that I identify and I should be here, or this would make me more comfortable, right? And then that could also create issues, as we understand, you know, a lot of places are impacted. And so they have, you know, lots of people coming through every day, remembering names and pronouns. Like there's a lot of things there. So that's one of the major misconceptions that we face, is that people just think, oh, there's not that many people who would be accessing these services anyway who identify as part of the LGBT community. Another thing that we see is that kind of how Abby mentioned as well, that not all unhoused LGBTQ people face the same barriers, right? So it just is dependent on, you know, a lot of people do come from other countries to the United States and are immigrants because of their LGBTQ identity, and they find that they will find more acceptance here, right? Like the Trans Latina Coalition in Los Angeles, they have a lot of people who are immigrants who come and access their services as a place of like, we can find acceptance here, and there's housing, and there's like people who will help us and understand our situation. So every person is different, every situation is different. And so being able to, maybe your organization doesn't have every single resource, that's not an expectation. It's more that we can work as a community collaboratively and say, you know, we have access to advocate for certain laws and policies, and you have access to have these like shelters and spaces, and so has access to, like, you know, they know someone in the city and we're working on certain issues. Like all that to say is we can work collaboratively and address these things and address these conceptions and myths.
You led us kind of beautifully into the next question, where I really wanted to dig in and just kind of hear from both of you about effective programming and effective policies. You know, I'm curious if you've seen any initiatives that have been having a significant impact in helping to prevent and end homelessness in LGBTQ communities. Abby, I think I'm coming to you first.
Thank you so much. So we encourage a housing first model. And so that's where we think about how before we try to help people with any substance use issues, with any mental health or physical health issues, we first focus on finding them housing without limiting their stay or sort of meeting other like behavioral markers to be able to be in a safe space at night and during the day. But we really emphasize that model because of it takes a harm reduction approach. It's proven to be best at eliminating harm or reducing harm. I'll then pass it over to you, Wendy, to talk more about the equal access rule.
Yeah, so before I talk about that, I did want to chime in a little bit. What you were mentioning is for our training, we do focus on a harm reduction model. And so we feel like harm reduction and housing first go hand in hand. So it really is about making sure that people have access to housing and then offering them resources. And so, that's evidence-based. We know that there's a lot of pushback, or it feels a lot like it's coming from like a place of like, there's a lot of stigma there and a misunderstanding of really what housing first is. But that's definitely something that we've seen when we work with homeless service providers. That does have a huge impact, particularly for the LGBT community. But yeah, one thing that I wanted to mention as well is that equal access rule as just a policy that has been challenged recently. But the equal access rule for HUD, does provide regulation around when people can, come and access services and be placed in, if it's like single sex or gendered spaces, they can access the space that feels right for them, right? Or aligns with their gender identity. And so we've seen a lot of challenges to it recently, or even like people saying there's going to be a lack of enforcement. So that's definitely something that, we want to bring up and address as something like that was a policy that was really championed by the LGBT community and that now is being challenged. But yeah, definitely.
Abby, I thought I saw you off mute, so I wasn't sure if there was something you wanted to add in there.
Oh, no, I think the only thing that I would maybe add is that these programs are a housing first model really does benefit the LGBTQ community like it does everyone, but specifically, I think LGBT people are more at risk for substance use disorders. And so many housing programs that is a factor of if you get housing or not. I think that can be discriminatory towards the LGBTQ community who might be self-medicating or have a substance use disorder because of trauma that they've experienced at a young age, which can look like discrimination, but the research also shows that LGBT people are more likely to have experienced, have a higher ACE score, an adverse childhood experience, where they also are more likely to have been abused physically, sexually, emotionally as a child. And so then that is part of why our community faces a higher risk of substance use disorder. So I did want to just add that in. I feel like it can be disproportionate in some ways. So yeah, but thank you.
Yeah, thanks for adding that in. I think I'll just speak a little bit to that in case anybody who's watching isn't quite sure what housing first is, what that approach is. And so as you heard from Abby, housing first is really sort of this philosophical approach to how we resolve homelessness, which is the kind of very simple idea that somebody needs a stable place to live and that is their basis to have support provided to them to be able to rebuild their life. But without having that stable roof, that permanent home, in order to do that, it's incredibly difficult to address any challenges that somebody might have. And so that's the housing first piece is really saying, the best opportunity that somebody has is when they're in a stable home and when they have a place to call home. And I think that that's something that can resonate with all of us, right? Anytime we're in a place of transition or uncertainty around where we are living, that is not a firm foundation on which for us to address any health concerns or gain employment or any of those other big pieces that may be shifting around us. And so the housing first approach is that belief that helping somebody have access to housing, that is like the foundational piece that needs to happen with those wraparound support services. Abby, Wendy, anything else you would like to add in to sort of explain to anybody watching about what housing first is?
No, I think you did it amazingly.
Awesome. Well, we did have some questions that came in from the audience. So when we set up the community chat, we always ask, what is it that you would like to hear about? And so one of the questions that came in was, I'll read it here for us. How can community members, service providers, and advocates? So we got three different groups here: the public, service providers, and advocates get involved in advancing housing equity for LGBTQ plus people? And are there any specific resources or calls to action that you recommend? Oh,
Yeah, I can go ahead and get us started there. So I definitely think that there's always something that everyone can do, whether it's like in their professional capacity or like locally or as an individual. So I definitely would say to look out for different changes and policies on the local level, as they do have a direct impact on yourself and your community around you. For example, the equal access rule is like a national type of rule with HUD, but it does have like local impact. So the thinking about that in regards to that as well is thinking about rent control, for example, which seems like, advocating for affordable housing. That also looks like advocating for creating more affordable housing in your area, right? Going to City Hall, advocating for those things, letting your local politicians know what are the things that you think as a community member, right? And that is just thinking on a policy level. There's also a lot of things that we can do together as a community to start addressing things in the ways that we can, whether there's places to donate that we can donate our money or time. I know, for example, there's an organization in Los Angeles called Water Drop LA, and then they do, water drops throughout Skid Row on Sundays. So it's like different things that everyone can do depending on your capacity and what you're able to do. Some of us work weekends. Like, what does that look like then? So I'll leave it there. But yeah, there's always something that we can do, whether it is, I definitely say start local first, get to know your community, those around you, and then you can work together to see what are the changes we'd like to see in this area or in this policy or, things like that. But I'll pass it to Abby.
Thank you so much, Wendy. And yeah, I think we can all support our unhoused neighbors in both big and small ways. And I think as we have seen recently with things going on with ICE and Border Patrol and the LAPD, that unhoused people have also been really impacted during this time. And so I think maybe now is more important than ever to be checking on the folks in your community. And then I also think if you can be involved in your city politics, local politics, that is equally as important. And so we can all find what we're best at and do that to the best of our ability.
thank you so much. And for anybody who might be watching who heard that piece about get involved in local politics and was thinking, oh my goodness, I'm intrigued, but I don't know how to do that. What does that look like? I do want to share that we teach an advocacy 101 class so we can help demystify that and equip anybody that wants to get engaged locally. And so if that's something that's of interest to anybody, we do host our advocacy 101 classes regularly. Oh my goodness, we're at 12:25. The time has been flying by. And I do want to just kind of give each of you space to reflect a little bit. And so I know that we are sort of in challenging times at the minute, but I'd be really curious if there is anything that kind of either of you really hold on to that gives you hope in your work around housing justice that you would like to share with us and with people watching.
I'll go ahead and get us started. For me, I think what gives me hope is seeing how people come together during the hardest of times. So right now, like Abby mentioned, you would think that there would be things in place so that, our unhoused neighbors aren't facing any more barriers or things as, ICE raids and things are happening. So it's like we can see how our communities come together to protect each other. And so that's in big and small ways, like showing up again, like we're saying, like advocating at the local level, handing out a water bottle, like anything that we can do together. I think that's what gives me hope is when I do see like people joining together and saying like, no, let's do something, right? Like, and there's always a little something that we can do. Like maybe we don't have a lot of time, maybe we don't have a lot of money, maybe we also feel like we're struggling, but there's always a little place for us to, use our voice and speak up. Whether that's like emailing somebody, sending a quick text, but there's always a place for us. And it's always great to see when communities come together. And I think we're seeing that now more than ever. I'll pass it to Abby.
I love what you said, Wendy. I don't think I could say it any better, but that definitely brings me hope. And I also think that affordable housing is something that impacts us all, especially in Southern California. And so I do feel like anyone I talk to cares about the issue, wants things to change. And that's really exciting to me because I think even if we're not facing necessarily housing instability, I think we're all impacted by the housing crisis and have a great amount of empathy here for our unhoused neighbors.
Thank you. And then my next question is there anything that you wanted to say today that you didn't get a chance to say earlier? And so, Abby, I'll come to you first. Was there anything that you were like, I gotta say this in this community chat and you didn't get a chance to?
I think the only thing I can think of is that for when I think about Pride Month, I think about our elders like Marsha P. Johnson, who and the people who really led the rebellion at Stonewall that sort of started this momentum that gave the LGBT community so many more rights and possibilities for what was in our lives. And most of those people were unhoused or unhoused at some point in their lives. And so I think as an LGBT person, I just want to acknowledge the long lineage of the unhoused community and the things that they have done for us and how powerful they are and how resilient.
Wendy, how about you?
Wow, I don't know if I could say anything more to add to that, Abby. It was beautifully said. But yes, I definitely believe that that is definitely something that we can keep in mind is how can we look to the past and see those moments of resilience in the LGBT community and in Pride Month, of course, we're doing this now for Pride Month. And I think it is important for us to see how we've always had each other's backs. We've always been there. Our communities do come together when we need it, and to not lose hope in that, not to feel overwhelmed by the fact that, there's so much happening and it can feel so overwhelming, but there is always a little place for us there. So yeah.
Thank you. And then my final question, I promise, is a very simple one, but I'm always really moved and inspired by the answers. What does home mean to you?
I think it's a place of safety, of comfort, and where you can be authentically yourself, but also in community. And I'll pass it to you, Wendy. I don't think I have more than my adjectives.
Yeah, I think I definitely agree. I think home is just a place where you can be more, you have that safety that you can be yourself, that you know that you are not alone, right? And whatever that means, right? You have a community there with you. You have people who support you and who care about you. And then that's what makes a place feel like home, is like even if you're struggling, there's always someone there who is checking in or, shows that they care. So I think in community, being in community feels like home.
Well, Thank you so much. Thank you, Wendy. Thank you, Abby. I really appreciate hearing your insights, your experiences. I know the team are dropping some local resources here into the chat box. And so I will make sure that we email those out to everybody as well. I really appreciate you joining us today. I know that this is a busy month, and so thank you for taking time out to talk to us here in Orange County. And I know we have people tuned in from all over the place, so we appreciate you making space for us. And so for those of you who are here on Zoom, a little poll is going to pop up right now. We always appreciate your feedback on the community chats. And so we use this information to help make sure we are providing conversations and dialogues that are of interest and that will help our community as we move forward. So thank you, everybody. Thank you again. And for joining us, we will see you next month. And as I sign off, I'll sign off with the reminder that by working together, we can build an Orange County where every person, regardless of identity, has a safe and affordable place to call home and the opportunity to thrive. Stay safe, everyone.